Well, cool. Well, welcome back to the Demand Podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Bland, co-founder of Omni Lab, and today I'm actually joined by Brett Queener, who's the managing director of Bonfire Ventures. So, Brett, first of all, welcome to the show, and glad to have you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Well, cool. Well, I know that we obviously work with one of your portfolio companies, maybe others. I hadn't looked at your whole entire portfolio, but I wanted to kind of get into a couple different things that we were just chatting about earlier before we started recording. And one of those was, and then maybe before we even do that, for folks that are even seeking funding in the future, and I know you guys typically invest in seed stage companies. I don't know if you also get into Series A rounds as well, but maybe just for folks that are listening, because a lot of times people that are listening are usually between the seed or pre-seed, sometimes all the way up into Series B. So who are the kind of right folks for Bonfire Ventures if they were ever interested in reaching out to you guys and coming up with a pitch deck and reaching out?
Absolutely. So all we do is B2B software, and all we do is seed. That's our entry point. So we are, when you're looking to raise your large seed round, we're writing $2 to $3 million checks into the seed round, which basically is you're at the point for which you believe with that amount of capital, you're 18 to 24 months away from raising a Series A. And so generally, the way to think about it is you've got product, you've got, I've got good number of customers we can talk to. We normally invest when people have 10 to 40K in MRR, right? And it's a team of like less than 10. And that's when we invest. And we sort of try to work hand in hand with our founders to build sort of repeatable motions, to get to the Series A. Because at the Series A, which is true today, it's always been true, but people lost the plot the last 5 years with a lot of money flooding the market, which is, at Series A, you have proven one motion. We have a product that we sell to these set of buyers in this way, this sales and marketing way that we make them happy, such that now if we're going to apply significant money, because equity isn't cheap, it's getting less cheap. The last couple of years, it was really cheap. So that when you apply that money, you're comfortable that it will yield returns.
Right. What are their metrics? I assume obviously you guys are doing proper due diligence in all of these investments, but are there typical metrics that you're looking for where you need to have certain retention metrics? Are you looking for churn?
When we
anything like
invest
that?
at seed, there aren't enough retention metrics because they, usually they've been selling sort of within the last year. So that's not figured out.
Okay. So less than a year. That's another good qualification.
Generally what normally happens, somebody starts a company, they self-fund it. They might do a friends and family round. They might do a pre-seed round. And I always advise founders to be like, raise the amount of money for you to get to a normal sequence, to a normal set of outcomes. So we invest, the company's been around for a year to 2 years. What we're looking for is revenue momentum, a great product, terrific founders, tell a narrative. And so, 10 to 30K in MRR. Sometimes it's a little earlier. There are some companies that are sort of real product led and freemium. So then we're looking more at usage and cohort data. On the customer side, we just talk to 3 to 5 customers, right? To just understand and uncover, like, is this a huge pain? Are they solving this pain, et cetera? So that's generally the criteria.
I like it. That's pretty easy. Makes sense. Well, I want to move into something then that I think we're all thinking about. I see this all the time on LinkedIn. Everyone's talking about, and it's clearly the news outside of LinkedIn, that the potential recession may be looming. A lot of folks are seeing some decrease in demand, at least from what we've seen, even some of the accounts we're working with in July, although that's also pretty typical. July and August are typically down months just because vacations and holidays and things like that. But what I saw as I was reading actually just this morning, and I don't know if you have these stats too, but Crunchbase came out with their typical article on what funding looks like and whatnot. There was a 33% decrease in VC funding from Q1 to Q2, and then around a 50% decrease in funding for Series A, Series B funds. For seed's always tough, and you probably know even more than I on this, but seed was a little bit tough. They said it was still down, but potentially not as much. A lot of times they don't get the data because not all of it's public immediately. So there's some things that, sometimes have to wait around for the market to kind of come back and say, hey, this is what's actually happening with seed round investing. So clearly there's maybe some slowdown. At the same time, though, I mean, you've got unemployment still very, very low. You've got jobs reports that are coming out, 400,000 jobs per month and whatnot. So there's a lot of good things, I guess, to be said at the same time. And I was just posting about this actually just today. But from a marketing perspective, specifically, where I'll be focusing most of the time on this call, is some folks are deciding, all right, should we be potentially moving away and dropping some programs for our marketing budgets? Should we potentially letting some folks go? Obviously, you've seen a lot of layoffs happen in the tech space and also folks putting on a hiring freeze. But I guess I'm kind of curious, maybe just to start with one question. Where are you guys, what are you advising, I guess, some of your current portfolio companies in terms of what they should be thinking about doing, either respect with marketing or maybe more general, depending on what you guys have said?
Well, I think it depends at what stage the company is at. I think when we say VC is down, it was up so much. So I think we should be looking at VC dollars vis-a-vis sort of pre the last 3 or 4 years. Because the last 3 to 4 years, there was this belief that these assets would keep getting valued high, and high. Oh, if I thought this company could be worth 10, 20, 30 billion, then I don't really care the entry price I pay right now. The founder doesn't want to take any more dilution they took 5 or 6 years ago, so they're getting double the amount of money for that. And then if people now realize, oh, these companies aren't going to be worth billions of dollars, then I'm not willing to pay as much and not give us as much. So to some extent, we saw the last 4 to 5 years of venture where there was a lot of money in the market that was primarily what I would call banker money or financial investor money, which is, oh, I'll put money in this asset, it'll grow up and I can mark my thing up. And last, what I'll call, there are VCs that are basically in the co-crafting business together, which is where is this firm at the stage, understanding that maybe they could become an iconic company, but that takes a long time. Like if you look, most public tech companies, even today, 90% of their market cap increase in value was from year 11 to 20, not the first 11. It's a long game. So I think funding is relative. Now, what it does mean is it's much harder for founders to raise money at any stage, especially Series A, Series B, Series C, because I think we're going back to what are the clear performance benchmarks, right? And I think what happened over the last 4 to 5 years is, look, people lost sight of a couple things. One, you have to build a business that's a good business, right?
The basics.
Like people need to have your product. You have to find a way to get them to, learn about, to attract them, close them in a relatively efficient model. We sort of lost sight of this and sort of the industry at large and sort of the chase for growth. And so now you see, oh, we got to get cash burn, sales efficiency. But look, cash burn always mattered. Sales efficiency, go-to-market efficiency always mattered. And so I like the fact that people are kind of focused on that. But in terms of the guidance, one thing we're clear when we're at seed stage, right, which is you're raising X amount of money, and how do we make that money last until you're at a point where you feel like you've got an investable story for the Series A? There's no like, let's go spend it all right now. Because the reality from seed to Series A, you don't really know anything. You have a thesis. You got like 10 to 30 customers who like you. You got a team of 5 to 8. Like you don't even know if you're going to be an effective leader, right? We don't know. You don't have all this market data. And so from seed to A, it's really about becoming a learning organization and like, oh, we did that. That worked well. Let's do more of that. Oh, that didn't work. Let's stop doing that. It's a series of experimentations. But what is always true, we spend a lot of time with our portfolio companies. And in fact, we do a very extensive workshop in the first month, which is really on value prop and messaging, which is, and what I say is you need to be able to answer these 3 questions to people. Well, first of all, let's figure out who we think our initial ICP is. Often people will try to chase multiple ICPs, 3 different buyers across 3 different segments. And like you hire somebody who runs demand gen, like, hey, can you get me leads for enterprise and SMB, for a sophisticated user and unsophisticated user? If I was in demand,
They're global. They're at all these countries. We need to spread budget. We need programs across all these places.
Like, really? Yeah. Like, what would my landing page say? It would be some million-dollar piece of shit that no one would resonate to.
Yeah.
So, an initial ICP. Maybe we don't know. Let's try 1 to 2. Within that ICP, you need to be able to answer the question. Why this? What is it that you're offering them that solves some pain that they need to solve now? Like, is this a painkiller or not? And what I would say is, in the new recession or et cetera, is if you're not a painkiller, don't go spend any money, right? 2, why you? Oh, you solve this interesting problem. Okay, but what is it that you do that allows me to achieve this outcome or solve this problem better? If you can't answer that, you might create a lot of pipeline, top of funnel that moves to stage 2. Okay, but it never, it doesn't move, from sort of mid to bottom.
Past that.
And then the last one is, well, why now? Because a lot of people are very busy. They got a lot of software tools. Why are they going to invest in a new tool now vis-a-vis everything else on their plate? And so I just spent a lot of time with companies and founders, and often you have technical founders that aren't marketers. And it's always weird coming as a marketer or technical founder. This is always this weird dance. Like, why this? Why you? Why now? And you need to talk about it not in terms of product features. You need to talk about it in terms of the outcomes that you can deliver for customers. And so that's my guidance in terms of seed to A. And then let's then build repeatable motions and start to add team members on selling and marketing and success to prove it out. The other second guidance that I make, which is true always, but also like the company can only grow as fast as you can grow as a leader. If you're a younger leader who hasn't gone through the troughs of the 3 years, moving from like an IC to a senior IC and then an IC to a leader and then a manager and then a leader of leaders, it's a lot to ask for you to suddenly like go from a team of 4 to 5 in a scrum to then where you're doing everything to now like, oh, I've got this world-class management team that I've set up this great OKR system and I figured out the right way to micromanage. That's a crock of shit. So that's the second journey. Yeah. The guidance for companies that are at the later stage, so they've now raised a Series A or a Series B, is really a focus on, okay, we believe we have market fit, but in terms of where we're going to go spend incremental dollars, often they ask me like, hey, Brett, should I extend runway? Okay, it's good to extend runway, but as the CEO, you need to look at your business and make sure that this is an investable business that returns profits and cash at some point. And if we choose to invest in growth instead of, profit, it's because we're pretty efficient at driving growth. And so as I start getting beyond Series A and B, I think they're, in my mind, because I work with software companies, there's sort of 3 metrics to look at. 1, what's our magic number, right? Which is, what did I spend in sales and marketing in a given period? And what did I yield in terms of net ARR? Now, if it's an SMB transactional business, I do it within the quarter. If it's a mid-market business, I look at it. If it's enterprise, I look sort of 6 months out. 2.
Yeah. I think just to cut in. So I think what you're saying that I think is really smart. So one thing is the biggest thing moving them from that seed to Series A is making sure that you have a compelling story to actually get to Series A. So meaning that you've driven enough learnings during seed stage of what doesn't work and what does work, so that when you do get to Series A and you're talking with investors, that you have a story. Hey, we've gone through the trials here. We know that this is the motion that actually works best because we've done these experiments, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're starting to get better results. We just need more fuel. Right, to put fuel on the fire and to keep moving forward.
People forget. Yes, you need results. So look, you're passing over $1 million. The bar maybe has gone to 1.5. Efficiency looks really good. At A, you probably have your first sign of renewals, et cetera, so that, customers are sticking or growing and expanding. The product seems to be a good product. It seems like you've made the right intentional decisions. You have a good product roadmap for where you want to go. But don't forget, the most important thing is the narrative. Like, oh, this can be a very big business. Because for venture, at A, they need to believe that this could get to $100 million in revenue. There are many businesses that are great software businesses, but maybe they won't get to $100 million in revenue. Great. Don't keep raising venture. Look at alternative sources of cash, bootstrap, do debt. Like there's not one size. But yes, somebody needs to look at it and go, I like this leadership team. I think the problem they're solving is a meaningful one. And if I give them $10 to $20 million, I can be relatively confident within reason that it'll be spent smartly.
Right. And I think that's the other thing you said. So clearly, like runway and burn, always important things that we have to keep in mind. So it doesn't necessarily mean just because a looming recession or a downturn or something that we should necessarily cut everything, because we still need to create a narrative and run experiments to learn to ultimately get to Series A versus cutting all that out. And then what that means is now we're just potentially extending our runway a little bit longer and surviving, but then we're not getting the experiments and the story and the narrative are not there, so that when we do need another raise and we do need to get to Series A, we're not going to have much of a story if we just started cutting everything. So I think that's the message maybe from that seed to Series A, which I know that you know all too well.
They don't have a marketer. They need to figure out marketing.
Right.
And, when they think about marketing, there's nothing. So you've got a top of funnel problem. Like I've got a new narrative where I'm trying to change the way people think. I'm like, okay, that's a content marketing. Oh, I need to nail my demand gen thing, which is some combination of inbound and building a good, effective outbound team, which they don't have. And then there's, of course, the product marketing. And the product marketing is not like launching a product, which is, what is the narrative when we get somebody through the funnel and we qualify the MQL and it comes through? What do our reps need to, know, say, or do in a repeatable way?
Right.
To move people from top to mid and mid to bottom. Well, in the scale org, I got 5 different, I got a CMO and I got 4 of these people from CDA. You can't afford all those people. So you're kind of like, all right, let me figure out, 2 people who can kind of net this out. But you can't cut your way to growth, right? The point of the matter is I have seen companies that like at Series A or B have 13 people in marketing, and I'm like, do we really know our plot? Are we pretty clear what our ICP is? Are we aligned, right? Before we start adding a bunch of people, the big challenge that with the money, people were adding a bunch of people across the company without really knowing the plot. The analogy that I would use is people were building a lot of second floor TV rooms and spas and the rest of it. There's no fucking stairs. Like, so I'm a big believer in like, there's a kernel. Let's believe in it. Let's add more and let's add more and let's add more, but in a very balanced, stacked fashion that each ad builds on the success of the ladder. But until you feel comfortable of incremental success of the layer, don't go throw a lot of people on there. Because what will happen is they probably won't be successful, right? They'll probably struggle. And at some point, you'd be like, well, I can't really afford that, which was a mistake. You shouldn't have sort of added people.
Right. I think what you said earlier, too, just to go back to it, is the whole figuring out your ICP. And I find this point always a little bit interesting because I think from a technical founder perspective, I can see why this happens a lot, where you have someone that came out with a really cool product or some really good tech, really good IP, and then they get together a business person and maybe someone who knows a little bit about marketing, and they say, all right, let's go figure out who wants this. And that's where you get yourself in the situations that you just mentioned, at least from all the companies we've worked with, where now it's like, well, let's try these 3, these 4, these 5, 6 segments, et cetera, across all these different geos. And their budget is something like $20, $30, $100,000 or something like that a month. And there's just no way that that's going to actually happen, right? We're not going to be successful doing that. So for me, I mean, I live in a little bit of a dream world where I'm thinking, all right, well, if I'm a founder and I started a company, then I likely identified a problem, hopefully, that multiple people had in a given market. And I talked to them and I got to know them and I knew these customers inside and out. I developed an MVP. I sold them that MVP. And then ultimately they started paying me some money. And then I took that narrative to a seed stage investor or Series A, depending on what round I'm trying to raise. And then ultimately that is my ICP for right now. Now, does that ICP change? Yeah, sure. The product matures. There's things that happen. Like shit is not going to be the same all the time. However, it shouldn't be a complete mystery, at least in my dream world, although literally probably 70-60% of the clients that we work with, they're all trying to figure out who their ICP is. No one knows, and I find that just very interesting. I don't know if you see that a lot with yours, but to me, it's like you started the company, I assume, with a customer and a problem in mind, with a narrative that you sold to a seed stage investor that, hey, this is where people are today. Here's where we want to take them. If they don't do it, this is the problem. And here's the results that they can do by getting there. Am I off on somewhere? What's your perspective there?
The challenge is when you start thinking about building a go-to-market motion, just starting with marketing, which let's say I was in this job. I had this problem. I started this. Okay. But just within my job, I don't know, say I'm a dev manager and it's a product for dev managers. Am I a dev manager at a small company, a mid-sized company, or a large company? We fully know that how you generate demand, how you sell, and how you deliver success to those clients is dramatically different from a small, middle, or large-sized company. You can't afford from CDA to say, I'm going to do all small, middle, and large. Second, even when you pick a segment to start with, you have to ask, like, were you a super clever dev manager? Oh, you were. Turns out in most of markets you go to, like 10% of the ICP is clever and the other 90% are not. Now, where you really make money is selling to non-clever people. But if you built the product for yourself and you were clever, then the product assumed a level of sophistication and power in that product that clever people could adjust. So it's not only what market segment, small, middle, large companies, am I going sophisticated or unsophisticated? Give me that to start with.
That's very interesting. I haven't thought about that before.
Forcing founders and teams into that. And also, because then that guides the roadmap and what we're going to go do. Post Series A, once we start to have traction, I do think, the three metrics I really look at is sales efficiency, or another version is CAC payoff. Like, what am I spending and how long does it take to pay off? Two is cash efficiency, right? Which is like how much am I burning versus I'm adding. If you have sales teams, one way to really look at your cash efficiency is the percentage of your employees that are AEs. Many years at Salesforce. Now, we had reps in SMB, mid-market, enterprise, and enterprise. But we always made sure that 20% of our employees were in a quota-carrying role. That made sure that we didn't overspend in the rest of the org. And I'm sorry, like if you can't make 20% of your employees, and maybe if you're just enterprise, it's 10, but somewhere between 10 and 20 successful, something's wrong. And you're spending too much money. You're like, oh, when I need to invest a ton in R&D, well, for what? Because like they're not making their numbers. So clearly we're not spending money smartly.
Right.
And then I start to look at gross and net retention to start to understand, how leaky is our bucket? Are our customers successful? And is there an expansion opportunity within our customers? So those are the ones that we really start to look at. And it's not about runway and can you raise at the next round. I think these are the core metrics that a CEO and a leadership team are thinking about and the decisions they're making. They should use that as their lens and have,
I like that. I'm going to move a slightly different direction. I'll caveat this and maybe we'll see how far you can go into this world. But in terms of marketing specific like strategies and things of that nature, do you get into that at all with any of the portfolio companies or maybe high level? I know that you've got, when you're doing seed rounds, there's so many different companies that you've got to invest in, right? So you don't necessarily have the full time to go in really, really deep with each of them.
The marketing perspective, a lot from CA is getting narrative and getting the initial team hired. And then when we get to A and beyond, there's a lot of conversations with the marketing leadership team about building out their team, what they're struggling with, and alignment with sales, which always occurs, even if I, tell et cetera.
Yeah. My question around that then is have you, with any of the portfolio companies that you're managing right now, anything that you're seeing that's out of the norm or that you think is working really, really well from a marketing perspective that maybe some other marketers could take learnings from if they're in that same stage? Anything that you guys have talked about with a portfolio company where you've seen some really strong results?
This is a generic statement, but for those that are relying on inbound, not ABM, not SDR outbound, but inbound. To the extent that you can show on your website what your product actually does with some level of narrative, your conversions will increase. You and I, and this is self-serving a little bit, you and I are involved with Turiel. It's very straightforward. Like if people are coming to your page, we spend all this time trying to figure out the right landing page and the right word, and we want the right level of depth. But if it's mobile, it goes, and do we use the right words? And then what's the case studies and the rest of it? But at the end of the day, if you can give people up front the ability to do some self-discovery about what their product does to generate interest, you are much more likely to get them to respond to, if your main CTA is sign for free, or sign up for a trial, or talk to us. It definitely will. Because for someone to raise their hand and say, I want to talk to you, I want to use product, we forget that there's some level of where they had to convince themselves that they want to do that. I think a second thing that I have seen some good levels of success, I was just talking about this with Chase at TrustPage, and he was telling our other founders, you're not leveraging third-party cookies, but basically they're using products like Clearbit, Reveal on their site. So what they're doing is figuring people,
it's a good one,
the list of companies that are visiting the site each week. Because look, if somebody raises their hand, it's great. But the mystery is, man, I get this bunch of traffic, but my conversions are low. So we try to think about more compelling offers to convert. So you and I just spoke about like a product tour or something that helps convert. But what he's doing is he's using a Clearbit Reveal. And then what he's doing for in LinkedIn and doing social marketing LinkedIn audiences, he's building a cohort of them and similar companies tailored to the job titles we want. And then they're running targeted social ads against those folks. And he's seen his CTR response rate go from, what did he say? 1% for traditional targeting to 30% using this method, right?
I completely believe it. I mean, and it's just so interesting too, because there's so much emphasis that goes around creating campaigns at the top of the funnel. We all want to optimize for, really high CTR or low cost, right? We want a really efficient channel. I'm speaking more from a paid perspective. So like those are the things we initially want, right? Because that's how we get more out of our money. But then to your point, none of it matters, and it's all to waste if you're sending that traffic to a page where people have no clue what you do, which brings back the point that we just talked about, product marketing. Do you have a clear message? Does it cut through the noise? Is it strip out all the confusing, terminology that maybe you use internally at your company, maybe that your buyer doesn't? And ultimately, what you just said, can they see the product? Can they try it out? Can they take a tour? And maybe that doesn't have to be Toriel. Like there's lots of different ways to do this, but Toriel, I think, does a great job doing it. But it could be just a short 3-minute demo of someone saying like, hey, you might be in a situation like this right now. Let me show you. Screen share. Boom, boom, boom. Doesn't need to be high production. Here's kind of what happens when you do that, right? Boom, these things happen. Great. Now I understand you've given me context, understand that you understand where I'm at as a person, and here's where you want to take them. Then you follow them through that journey, and immediately then the gears start clicking, right? And hopefully your copy can do a good job of that too. But I think sometimes a video, there's just no other replacement. And these things are such low effort. I mean, this is not a big pull at all, but most people, and I'm sure maybe you'd agree with this, that most people fear showing the product. They think the product's not ready. It doesn't look good enough. Their competitors are going to steal it. If they put their product actually on their website, then it'll actually decrease conversions, because then people won't need to reach out to sales, which in our experience and talking with Andy and Toriel, I just know this just from looking at a whole bunch of data, like it's all bullshit. Like that, those things are not true. Those are insecurities about your product and insecurities about feeling like someone's copying you. They're busy helping their customers. They're not just hanging out on your website looking at you all day
things for
as much as you think they are,
Not lose sight up from a marketing or demand gen perspective, which is, are you in an existing category and you're trying to replace an incumbent? such that there is a history of keywords. Like somebody is looking for the solution category that you're in. Okay, then paid and inbound demand gen makes a lot of sense. If you're doing category creation, right? You solve a pain, but no one's looking for a solution because they've never bought a solution in your category. Investing a ton in paid and in keywords and optimizing all that is all a bit silly, right? You're going to have to probably invest in top of funnel narrative more and more outbound with an SDR or AE outreach with good product marketing, right? People forget that. The second one is there's this big thing about, I want to be product led. I want to be product led. I'm just going to be product led. Okay. Again, if it's a brand new category and you think it's going to be product led and somebody's just going to go to your website and then the product's going to drive it, good luck. And then the other thing about product led is you just need to be very honest with where is the state of your product today. Like people often want to throw a free trial or get somebody into the product and they don't look at it and go, does the user, when they get in here, can they do discovery pretty quickly on their own and grok the value of what this does, aren't too confused. So I've had companies that, I love it. It was on their website, sign up for free trial. And I was like, this thing's donkey. And they're like, we're not getting any inbound. And so I finally convinced them to kill it. Ton of inbound, right? It's not ready. So it's just important to understand. People just want to do a lot of the basics or the new catchwords, but each situation is different depending on, are you something new or an existing market? Where are you in terms of product maturity? And you have to all line those up.
Yeah, agreed. I want to move to one topic. I know we're almost to time here. So there's one thing I definitely wanted to get to, and let me know if you've got some deeper thoughts on this. If you don't have too many, then we just kind of riff on it for a second. But the topic of marketing attribution, and you already listed out a lot of the different metrics that you're looking at: CAC payback, cash efficiency, gross net retention, expansion, et cetera, things like that, in terms of the numbers that you want to get from a founder or the CEO or the team. These are the things that you want to look at, not only for evaluating a new raise, but also these are probably, it sounds like, metrics that you also look like on an ongoing basis. How are things looking after I've invested? But I think the thing that always happens with all marketers, right, is we all ideally would love to have perfect attribution, that everything is perfectly black and white. I put a nickel in, I get 3 out of every single channel. But you probably know this better than I, but I'll give you my perspective on it. Let's see if we align at all. But the buyer journey is not linear. It's not like I saw a LinkedIn ad or a organic post on search while I was looking around, and all of a sudden I was so sold and so convinced that boom, that's it. Now I'm in the hopper, and now I've converted into pipeline, hopefully revenue. It doesn't work that way. There's multiple different touch points, and each of those journeys are not always going to be easily tracked, right? Especially for the less sophisticated SaaS company that's seed, Series A. They're not going to have the infrastructure to do some crazy BigQuery setup, taking tons of data in to understand everything. And even if they did that, all they'd see is that each of the different journeys are made up of multiple touch points, of which they probably touched a whole lot of different things, assuming all those channels were aligned, not just talking about paid anything, that all those channels were aligned around the same ICP. And so I always take the stance with all of our companies like, hey, we're going to measure absolutely everything we can measure, right? And we're going to make decisions on those more as a guide than a black and white playbook. And we're going to also understand that we need to look at the funnel a little bit more in the aggregate, right? So you mentioned this earlier a second ago. I invested XY dollars in sales and marketing. What did I get back in terms of revenue? You just said that a second ago, and I completely agree. But do you also get a little bit more into the weeds with regards to marketing attribution? What would you say to, companies at that stage? Is that something they should focus on a ton?
It depends on, it's a lot easier if the business is only like an SMB inbound business. Right. There's no concept of ABM.
Yep.
Okay. To some extent, if it's a primarily inbound business, it's much easier to assign attribution to marketing as a whole. But in terms of individual tactics, it's more challenging because if you're a good marketer, as I just mentioned, if somebody's coming to your website, but then you're, then hitting them up on LinkedIn, et cetera. So the biggest thing that I do with CMOs is at a board meeting, I ask them, often they'll start like, here's what marketing pipeline we generated that closed in this quarter. Like, stop it. I don't give a shit. My question, how much pipeline did we need to create in aggregate? I don't care across sales, SDR, or marketing? Did we create enough pipeline? And also getting people to start thinking about this, which is, look, we know based on how many reps and how much quota they have and whether it's a long sales cycle, sort of like to make our number in future quarters, we should know nominally how much pipeline we needed to create this quarter. Because if we walk into a quarter with less than 3x coverage, we ain't making our number. And so instead of being boo-hoo, what do? You say, so a big thing is, Mr. Marketer, what is the pipeline goal that we're supposed to create for this quarter? And did we hit that goal? Yes or no? And qualified pipeline, not visits, demos. How much qualified pipeline did we create this quarter? And let's be clear on what qualified means. Secondly, within that, what was our assumption, roughly, on how much of that pipeline was coming pure from marketing, from the SDR team, and from pure AE self-sourcing, roughly, because we also know as you start to move up market, you start talking about ABM, it's like a 6-year-old T-ball game. Everybody gets a snow cone, but it's touched multiple times. So the idea of pure source, but just roughly, which of these three engines at a rough level isn't firing the way that you'd want to fire? And then let's get down to, okay, what's working or not working?
Right.
Often we get a sheet that says, I spent this money in Google. I did this event, and here's what returned. So, and I also think in certain programs, we should have intentionality in marketing attribution. There are things that we do that are not source events. You know what really works well in enterprise deals? Having an event at a club at a sporting event, a box. You know what's really worked? Closing deals or opening up doors to new prospects sometimes is an executive dinner. But let's be clear that we spent this money at duration and did it mature, or we spent this money to generate new. And just being clear, if we try to look at it all relative to like sourcing, we forget why we do stuff. And then look, the rough envelope that I try to do for what are we willing to spend in marketing spend, it's tricky when you're early because the people spend is greater than your program spend. Because once you hire, in the early stage, you're hiring people, just like if you hire sales managers, they're overpaid vis-a-vis, the reps they have. Just like in marketing, you're overpaid vis-a-vis the program dollars you spend. Look, I want to get to a point where at least 50% of our cost in marketing, if not more, is program spend versus people spend. One. At least. Otherwise, something's not
program.
scaling.
Got it.
Two, at the end of the day, what founders should think about is, look, there's a magic number in theory of 1. What does 1 mean? 1 means I spend $1 to generate an incremental dollar in sales and marketing. Okay, so let's break down that dollar of sales and marketing spend. What has to get funded there? Salespeople, sales managers, SEs, SDRs, demand gen, and actually CSMs. Professional services and support go to COGS. Okay, all right. What should I be willing to spend? And on demand. And for me, it's like, I take all the sales and SEs and sales enablement and sales ops, it's kind of 50 cents on the dollar, fine. And, I probably should be willing to spend 25 cents on the dollar on my number, 20 to 30 cents a dollar for demand gen as a whole. Okay. And then you can work back from there. You'd be like, look, if you're like, oh.
Well, then you adjust.
You go, all right.
Then you adjust. I mean,
I was going to spend $1 million to close $1 million. All right. Well, I got to spend 30 cents on that. Okay. I got $300,000 to generate $1 million of closed deals. All right. Well, but sales is sourcing half of them. Okay. So there's $500,000 of closed deals. What's our close rate? 33%. Okay. So I needed to give $1.5 million of pipeline at a, 300, whatever that might be. So that would say in that model, for every dollar demand gen or total spend, that's people and program, I got to get 5X. Well, if people are half, okay. So that means for every dollar I spend in demand, I need to get $10 of qualified pipeline. It's not It doesn't need to be super califragilistic, running like some super algorithm. Just at a high level, does that foot?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, and I think it is laughable how much time can be spent just figuring out, measuring, and attributing every little thing, and having no time to actually think about creative campaign planning and things that are actually going to drive.
Hires a really good product marketer early because he's like, oh, if that close rate's 20%, I got to do 5x the pipeline. That's ridiculous, but everyone's going to be sad. So if I have a product marketer who's really good at making sure we know what to say, top to mid and mid to bottom. So if I can get that close rate up, then I need to generate less pipe. So just by getting them to think holistically, they're thinking, it makes 100%. The world better. So I don't know if that's super helpful, but that's just so forest through the trees. But it's a magic board meeting to say, no.
It is.
I want you to come back next year and talk about pipeline as aggregate. You are the pipeline czar. And then we talk about how marketing is doing.
Love it. Yeah, totally agree. Couldn't add anything better to that. I mean, the only direct translation back to our good old friend's tutorial there is that by actually educating upfront the consumer, the buyer more, you can actually drive up those close rates. And we've talked to Andy about this quite a bit, and we'll see this even when someone's properly educated, even through inbound marketing efforts or demand gen efforts, that they're coming in, they already know what it does, what it is, how it works. They've been to the website. Website's really clear. They're just getting on the phone with the sales rep to answer a few kind of custom questions that maybe didn't get answered to the website. They're going to move through that deal cycle a lot faster, plus the close rates are going to be a lot higher. So there's all those things that kind of happen in a Toriel-like case where it's not just Toriel's main proposition is higher conversion rates, more demos, more sales conversations, but you're going to have people that are more aware of what it is and what's not. Plus, then you've also got the quality increasing too, because you've got people that are more aware, oh, this isn't for me. So they'll be able to self-qualify out. And then they'll say, yeah, this isn't exactly what I was looking for. So then the sales reps spend less time with bad leads, which gives them more time to spend time on the good leads, which again helps the whole funnel move well. So I think those things are important.
The biggest issue I have with sales teams or with them is they go up and they just talk and they start just demoing features. Like I'm on the Jungle Cruise at Disney. And so if the buyer already understands the product and the rest of it, then the sales rep can actually sell, which is like, oh, you like this, et cetera. These are the pains that our customers tend to have, and this is the outcomes I want. Can I confirm that? Oh, is that what you saw? Okay, what excited you about that? Okay, and then if the rep does a demo, we're digging into the areas that keep the buyer within the frame, as opposed to just showing up and like, yeah, look at my fun demo, and then like not knowing what's going on. So this is salespeople could actually do some selling better.
Yeah. When I click this purple box will do this. I don't give a shit what the purple box says. Whether it's purple or not doesn't matter. I just want to know, how is it going to help me do something or solve a problem that I'm actually experiencing right now? That's it. That's all I want to know. I don't care what color it is. You can make it yellow. It's all good. So, well, cool, man. Well, hey, thanks for jumping on. I'll let you get back to it, and then we'll have to stay in touch here on LinkedIn or wherever.